Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Dig Your Dinner this month. We are doing Fennel and Kohlrabi. Why Fennel and Kohlrabi, you may ask? Well, we've got to cover the obscure ones every once in a while. So, these ones, they don't have a lot in common, but they do have some things in common. They are both cool season crops. They are both bulbous stems that are eaten and consumed in various ways. And so that is going to be our focus here in September. Chelsea is joining me today. My name is Anthony Reardon. I'm the horticulture small farms agent. Chelsea is our nutrition and food safety. And one other thing I can't remember. What is it, Chelsea? Health agent. So thank you for joining. I will go ahead and share my slides and we'll get going. Okay, so as I said, this month's topic is Fennel and Kohlrabi, and I always like to give a couple of publication recommendations as we start these off, just so you can get additional information after we go through our little session here. Obviously, the Kansas Garden Guide is going to be a great go-to resource for you on this one because they're both vegetables. Both your fennel and your kohlrabi can be found within the Kansas Garden Guides, and you can either find the free version at this link here through the KSRE bookstore, or you can purchase a physical edition of the book through our office. But fennel will be on page 151 and kohlrabi will be on page 155. Some other publications. I really like Minnesota Extension's vegetable pages specifically. So you can find one on kohlrabi and fennel. They don't necessarily have one for that specifically, but they do have growing herbs in home gardens, which touches on fennel. So there are a couple of publications out there with other various extension units where you can find more information on these various crops. First things off, I wanted to talk about fennel first. So fennel is a close relative to your dill, carrots, and parsley. If you look at like the fronds or the leaves that are kind of growing on those plants, it makes a lot of sense when you see, oh, they're very dainty. They kind of fly around in the air really easily, and they're both just they're very similar growing patterns and foliage in general. Often with your fennel, you're going to be growing it for foliage, but you can also grow it for your flowers and you can also grow it for seeds. So there's lots of different reasons. There are specific varieties as well that are bulbing fennel, as you see in this large photo here on the right. And with bulbing fennel, that is your vegetable option, right? So you can also consume it as a vegetable in addition to as an herb and as a spice. In any of these cases, it's going to have a little bit of a licorice flavor, so I'll let Chelsea talk more about that because she's going to get into the cooking of it all, but that is why fennel is generally grown and used. So fennel in Kansas, it's one of those herbs. It is, it's going to be a little bit sensitive to your environmental conditions, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to perform well for you. So most herbs are going to perform well in Kansas within the correct season, and this includes fennel. You're just going to want to look for varieties that are fast maturing and bolt resistant because they thrive in cool, moist conditions. So specifically, you're going to either be growing these in the spring or in the fall. And in either occasion, you're going to want to be trying to ensure that consistent soil moisture and as cool conditions as possible as you can provide without, controlling the weather. So in the spring, you will be sowing seeds in mid-March through April. And then if you're trying to grow in the fall, you would be sowing them actually in late July and early August, which obviously is not a very cool period whatsoever. So you will have to do a little bit of finessing of the soil in that case. Mulching will be very critical to kind of keep that cool moisture on those young plants. With your bulbing types specifically, those ones you are going to want to be growing only in cool weather. So I really wanted to even try pushing it into those hotter months at all because it's just going to bolt on you immediately. It's just not going to perform well. So you'll have to watch specifically the types of varieties that you're working with. Transplanting is an option here, which can be very useful with, such limited windows for growing some of these plants. Just know that with your fennel, they are a delicate plant, so you have to really kind of be careful as you are transplanting it. So, specifically with the bulbing fennel varieties, these are either going to be known as Florence fennel or Finocchio, variety-wise. That's what they're going to be labeled as. They can be harvested at any size when you are harvesting those bulb types, but they are generally going to be best at a 3-inch width. Beyond that, they're going to start losing their quality of flavor and texture. Again, these only grow in cool weather. And as far as what they're used for, again, this is Chelsea's area. I'm not trying to grow other stuff, but it's a palate cleanser a lot, and it's also a digestion aid. So that's why people will grow these. I'm sure she'll touch more on that. So as far as planting fennel goes, you are going to, when sowing seeds, try to sow them at least 2 to 3 inches apart. And then after they've started to sprout for you, you're going to want to thin those plants to every 4 to 6 inches to give it about half a foot space for those plants to develop and grow. That said, if you are growing the bulbing types, it's going to need even more space. So you may have to really kind of push that 6 inches to 8 or 12. And then as far as your row spacing goes, you'll want to watch that as well. So make sure you've got at least a foot between those rows so that you can get in there and harvest and do the maintenance that you need to do on the plants. The types that are grown for foliage also are going to get very tall. So foliage and seed, actually, those ones, they need a lot of space. So you may have to give it even more space than what we've discussed here. So you'll just want to look at the specific variety you're working with and be sure to follow the instructions for that variety. Again, transplants are very delicate. As far as crop rotation goes, I mentioned these are related to dill and carrots and parsley. So you don't want to be planting these plants, fennel specifically, in any location where your dill, carrot, or parsley has grown in the past because they all share similar pests and diseases. So as best you can, try to rotate to a different area where that family of plants has not been growing recently. When it comes to care for your fennel, they're fairly drought tolerant once they are established. However, you do need to get to them established well enough first, meaning that they've got a healthy root system and they've got plenty of leaves on there. Um, Keeping that in mind, however, heat and drought are going to equate to stress on your plant. Stress then is going to equate to bolting on your plant where it is flowering. Bolting is then going to equate to a loss of crop quality. So, it is drought tolerant, but the more you push that drought tolerance, the more quality you are going to be losing in the plant. So just keep that in mind. Really, as long as you can keep a consistent soil moisture and a cooler soil moisture, the better it's going to perform for you. It will also tolerate a light frost if you are using it as a fall crop. So it's definitely not going to handle, a hard freeze, but you may be able to push it past, a light freeze that you may get in those earlier weeks of the fall. So when it comes to harvesting fennel, there's three different types of harvest here, right? You've got your foliage, your seeds, and your bulbs. Foliage itself can be harvested at any time while the plant is growing. I would just kind of follow the 1/3 rule with this, where if you're removing more than a third of the foliage, you're probably going to be stressing the plant out. So be careful on that front. With the seeds, you actually want those to be allowed to dry fully on the plant before they are harvested. So you'll just allow the plant to dry naturally, the flower of the plant. And as far as the bulbs go, again, as I mentioned, 3 inches width is preferential. What you do is you just make a flush cut right at the roots below the bulb. And then you would trim off those tops, probably about at 1 or 2 inches where the stems are, and you can actually store those in plastic bags, refrigerated for several weeks. Again, past that 4-inch mark, you're going to start seeing a decrease in quality of the bulb, and it's going to likely start bolting on you and becoming woody. Some potential issues with your fennel. Aphids are going to be a big one on this. Best thing you can do with that, you can try some neem oil, but beneficial insects will help a lot. So if you've got a lot of just pollinator plants nearby or pollinator flowers that are going to bring in pollinators and ladybugs and what have you, having those beneficials nearby, they will prey on those aphids and help control those populations. Um, So that in a combination with neem oil will be a good control method for that. Bolting and heat stress, as I mentioned, is going to be a big thing to try to mitigate. Bolting is a great example here is on the right, where you just see tons and tons of flowers. That fennel is probably not going to have very good quality unless, again, you're just trying to eat the fronds of it, in which case it's probably fine. Um, but if you are aiming for a bulb, that's where it's going to lose its quality. With that, you can aim to cool off the ground by mulching, which could, because that's going to always help you with consistent water moisture. It's going to help with weed control, and it's going to help with a more consistent ground temperature for the plants. And so there's lots of benefits with that. And then also just watch your watering strategy in general. You obviously don't want to oversaturate it or undersaturate it. It's kind of just keep aim for that happily moist, damp sponge texture within your soil. There's also parsley worm that you see here on the bottom left, also known as swallowtail caterpillars. I would not recommend killing these because, again, they are swallowtail caterpillars. It's not something that is typically done in a garden scenario because we're trying to encourage our pollinators, and swallowtails are a very appreciated one. So what people will actually do on this is a lot of people they'll plant fennel intentionally for the swallowtails, but if you're not aiming for swallowtails, you can try netting or row covers to keep those caterpillars out of there. They are large enough caterpillars, you can probably hand pick those out of your plants that you're trying to keep for yourself and put them onto a different plant. And you can accept some feeding if it's not completely decimating the plant. And then looking at kohlrabi, switching over here a little bit. Um, Very similar to your fennel as far as bulbing types go, right? It's also another cool season crop. And it kind of has these gnarly, spokey stems coming out of all directions again on the plant. So when you're looking at kohlrabi specifically, though, these ones are within the Brassicaceae family. It's a hardy cruciferous crop related to your broccoli and your cabbage. It's a cool season crop. And with that, they're all going to kind of share the exact same pests. The vegetable of this plant itself is that bulb that you see down in the center. So it's not necessarily the leaves you're eating, it's that bulb that has grown, which is actually a large swollen stem of the plant. It does re kind of resemble a turnip, but it does have those spokey stems kind of coming out of every direction of it. Um, the biggest thing to remember with kohlrabi as well is that outside of a specific temperature range, it is going to bolt on you. So it can, when I say that specific range, I don't just mean when it gets too hot. Also, actually, when it is below 45 degrees, it will start trying to bolt as well. Because remember, bolting is a genetic response or a hormonal response within the plant, really. It's telling it needs to flower now and reproduce so that it can continue to exist in the environment because it is stressed out and it knows it's about to die. So it's just a response knowing that it's not going to thrive outside of that temperature range in general. Um, and so we'll talk again a bit about how you can help mitigate that. So as far as your kohlrabi in Kansas goes, most varieties will do well if planted at the correct time. And then again, talking about that temperature range. So it will bolt at high temperatures, but it will also bolt below 45 degrees. So you just really have to watch the timing of it itself. If you're wondering what it looks like when it bolts, that photo on the bottom left there is a representation of that. Kind of resembles a broccoli flower a little bit. So if you're starting to see that on your kohlrabi, it's likely starting to lose quality. With the spring crop, then, you will want to plant in Kansas in mid-March through April. And with a fall crop, you would plant again in July through early August. Um, and again, with those July conditions, you'll want to work with the soil moisture and temperature, most likely just utilizing a good layer of mulch on there and cohesion with a good watering plan. Both purple and green varieties of this plant will do well in Kansas as well. So I haven't really shown a photo of the purple varieties of kohlrabi yet, but they do exist and they're just as good. Ah, here they are. So there's an example of what purple kohlrabi kind of looks like, although those bulbs aren't really developed yet. So as far as seed spacing on this goes, again, it's 2 to 3 inches apart, and then thin those down to every 4 to 6 inches. If you do have larger varieties of this, however, because the bulbs will get pretty big, you may have to space them as much as a foot apart. So again, just watch those bulbing types. And again, with the row spacing, that is going to have to be a little bit larger as well to accommodate for those bulbs to be able to develop. Transplants with these are a lot more easily done than with your fennel because they're not as delicate. As I mentioned, the Brassicasias, they're very hardy, right? So it's hard to really rough up those plants unless you're actively trying to. So with that, very easily done, and that can actually help you a lot with your kohlrabi because you again are aiming for such a specific temperature window for its development. So if you know that's the forecast for the next 4 weeks, say 4 weeks, you probably only need about 6 weeks, but is expected to be consistent temperatures. You can take your aim to have your plugs ready at that time and getting those into the ground, and you can kind of skip the whole sprouting process because it's already been sprouted for you, and then you essentially shave several weeks of that growing time off. As far as your crop rotation goes, these are going to be related to turnips, radishes, not necessarily related to radishes, but sharing the same pests. Also, cabbage, kale, mustard, Brussels sprouts, collards, broccoli, cauliflower. So all of the little spots that those have been, grown within your garden, it's really not ideal to plant this in that exact same spot because they're going to share the same pests. Now, that said, that is a lot of crops. So if you absolutely can't get by, finding a new spot to plant those in, it's not the end of the world. Just know that you're going to have a little bit more pest pressure there to address. So as far as your care for your kohlrabi goes, peak quality is going to always occur when you have consistently cool and moist soil conditions. So, early spring and then mid to late fall, those are good times to be aiming for your kohlrabi development. Um, Mulching will always help with this because, again, the soil and temperature effects. And then moisture stress is a thing as well. So if you do, not necessarily pay much attention to the moisture because you're relying on the environment, you might have some problems because moisture stress is going to relate to or equate to cracked bulbs. So the more consistent moisture you can get, which again, your mulching will help with, the better your bulbs are going to develop. Row crops or row covers, I'm sorry, may be necessary for the most effective insect protection for this, and we'll talk about that shortly. Um, but when it comes to harvesting your kohlrabi, it's very similar to your fennel. So best flavor is going to be with a small to medium bulb, 2 to 3 inches in width is ideal. That said, there are some new varieties on the market that have been developed recently that are meant to be larger bulbs. So again, it's watch the variety that you're working with and pay attention to the specific directions for that variety because there are some larger ones out there now that are meant to grow larger and they won't become fibrous and woody or bitter or splits like the other ones would. So again, just cut these flush below the bulb at the roots, trim the leaves at the top, and these ones can be stored in a plastic bag and refrigerated for a few weeks. So some potential pests that you'll see in this, again, aphids would be an issue, so look at your neem oil and your beneficial insects. As far as other pests, there's also flea beetles, which are a huge issue. You'll see that on the top right here. Um, with those, you can look at row covers, kale and clay. There are many organic pesticide options for them as well, but you'll just want to watch because a lot of those same pesticides that are labeled for flea beetles are harmful to pollinators. So, if you do find yourself in that scenario, just make sure that you are applying early in the morning or late in the evening when the pollinators are basically sleeping and not flying around and not being as much exposed to these pesticides. Cabbage worms and loopers are a very big thing with any of your cruciferous crops. You're definitely going to see a lot of them in the spring and even more of them in the fall. So those are a big one to watch out for. In this case, Bacillus thuringiensis, which is bacteria and an organic active ingredient, will probably be your best option for treating these because they specifically target caterpillars. And then again, bolting bitter fibrous cracked bulbs, mulching is going to be your best option. And as you know, if you've watched these webinars, I always like to throw something fun in at the end of these. So, botanically speaking, the vegetable we eat of both fennel and kohlrabi is actually the stem of the plant. They've both been adapted to sort of develop into this bulb form, but you are actually eating a stem. So, with that, I will go ahead and end my sharing here and let Chelsea take over.
All right. As Anthony said, my name is Chelsea, and I'm the Nutrition Food Safety Health Agent here in Johnson County at the Extension Office. I'm going to talk about fennel and kohlrabi, and I realize that that is spelled wrong on the first slide. Um, we will talk about the nutrition as well as some of the other growing principles. With fennel here, the entire fennel plant is edible. So the bulbs, the fronds, the stalk, and even the seeds. As Anthony had mentioned, fennel has a licorice-like flavor, and so it does have hints of sweetness, and the bulb is actually very crunchy. Here's just some examples of some flavor affinities, which basically is those combinations of flavors that tend to go well together. This list is by all means not exhaustive, but everything from fennel, almond, fennel seeds, honey, and lemon to fennel, orange, and sambuca. So just different spices and herbs, and fennel really does pair well with lots of different foods. Nutritionally speaking, fennel and kohlrabi are both powerhouses when it comes to the nutrition they provide. So you can see here that this is a fairly low calorie food with 6 grams of carbohydrates and about 2.5 grams of fiber per 1 cup of sliced. This is just speaking for the bulb. I don't have the nutrition information if you do the fronds or the seeds. But we also have calcium, iron, magnesium, potassium, some vitamin A and vitamin C as well. All of these are found in our fennel plant. From the health perspective of fennel, this really is not a commonly researched ingredient when we talk about food and health. There are some studies, but ultimately, there's not a ton of studies looking at the nutritional and health impacts. A couple things we do know, though, is that fennel does have antioxidants, it does have fiber, it's a great food source, and therefore, any of our fruits and vegetables, when consumed, can help reduce the risk of certain chronic diseases, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. This is a low carbohydrate food. So when we think about trying to manage our carbohydrate intake for type 2 diabetes, this would be a great vegetable option. As Anthony had hinted at, fennel seeds have been researched to look at improved digestion. The theory is that it helps to reduce inflammation, thus improving digestion, sometimes even eliminating and helping to control IBS. Although mixed research has shown that there's a variety of different things that go into it. But historically speaking, fennel has been one of those things, specifically fennel tea or just adding some fennel to a salad to help. People will use it to aid in digestion. Culinary uses, as I mentioned, all of them are consumable. So we have the bulb, which is that crunchy, mild licorice flavor. It's great in raw salads or cooked and roasted. The fronds, delicate herb-like garnish for soups and seafoods or dips. Some people use it in replace of dill sometimes. And then the seeds are that warm, sweet flavor. They're traditionally used in sausages, curries, even tea, right? Fennel tea is a great addition to include, and even baked goods. There's fennel cookies, there's fennel used in breads, so lots of different uses for that. As I mentioned, fennel in salads is a great way to incorporate it in the raw version. Usually you can slice it up however you want it. If you have a vegetable peeler, making thin ribbons with that peeler is a great way to add it to your salads. thinly slicing with a mandolin. However, be very careful as the mandolin is quite sharp. Dicing it like an onion, so just chopping it up is a great option for throwing into salads. Or if you slice it lengthwise or crosswise with a chef's knife, you can kind of see the image there on the right-hand side. You'll get these nice like half moon, half circle shapes, which add a nice visually appealing different texture and different sizes when we think about adding uniqueness to salads. And then fennel can be used in many other dishes, right? Roasting or grilling it brings out that sweetness through that caramelization process. Braising it actually tones down that flavor a little bit. So if that strong licorice flavor is not your cup of tea, by braising it, it helps to tone down those flavors and makes it very tender and mellow. Adding it to soups and stews, it adds a subtle sweetness. As I mentioned, fennel can have some sweetness to it beyond the licorice flavor. And then you can also substitute the stalks for soups and stews, doing the sauteed fennel as a bed, roast fennel wedges, right? With just a little salt and pepper and garlic and butter. And then, of course, the fennel tea using the fennel seeds. So if you don't have fennel, you can substitute some similar ingredient. So for example, fennel seeds, you can use anise seeds, which have a very similar flavor. If you are looking to substitute something for the fennel bulb, certainly you can substitute celery in a pinch. And then if you're looking for a texture replacement using bok choy, as it kind of has that same similar crunch. So if you are in a bind and you don't have fennel, or maybe you don't have enough fennel for a recipe, you can always use some of these substitutes that you might have in your pantry or refrigerator already. So really storing fennel, we want to make sure we wash it when we're ready to use it. Moisture is the enemy of most of our fruits and vegetables, and so washing it right before use is going to be important. You could certainly separate the stalks and fronds if you're going to use them later. The bulb tends to hold up longer than the stalks and fronds, so separating those out, you can store them appropriately and use them as needed. Storing in a paper or kitchen towel in a bag helps to keep them in that refrigerator at a good quality for longer. And then the fennel seeds, right? We always want to make sure that we're storing our herbs, seeds, and spices in an airtight container, and we want to place them away from heat, light, and moisture. So if your herb and seasoning pantry is right by the stove, I encourage you to find a new place for it, making sure that it's in a place away from that heat and light and moisture that is coming from your stovetop as you're cooking. Preserving fennels. So fennel and kohlrabi, I'll go through both of them, but they're not great ones for home food preservation. So fennel and kohlrabi are really going to be those that are consumed best when they're fresh and using while they're in season. There are no tested and approved recipes. You will find some recipes that have the fennel seeds for flavoring, and if it has fennel seeds, it's perfectly fine to use from a tested recipe perspective. You will also see some pickled fennel recipes out there online. They are certainly safe to use as long as they are using refrigerated recipes only, meaning that you may be pickling your fennel and keeping it stored in the refrigerator. Any recipe that says to water bath or to pressure can for long-term storage is not a tested and approved recipe. Dehydrating, from the perspective of the bulb and the stalks, they don't really dehydrate great, but definitely using the fennel seeds as a dehydrated method. So the seeds of the fennel can be left on the plant until mature. You cut your flower stalks and hang them upside down and then shake the seeds out when they're dry. If they are using for long-term storage, we want to make sure that they be heat treated to destroy any insects or potential eggs. So here's just some guidelines for making sure that you're heating those herbs or seeds. In either heating or freezing also works in that zero or sub-zero temperature. Preserving fennel, you can freeze the stalks and fronds. They do freeze pretty well, and then you'll just want to make sure they're in a freezer safe bag. It is not recommended to freeze the bulb. It does have a higher water content, and therefore, once it is thawed, the texture will change. Now, if you are going to use the bulb like pureed in a soup or something like that, then definitely freezing it would be perfectly fine, but it will lose its crunchy flavor and texture. So you will have to make sure that you're using it for an appropriate recipe where the texture is not going to be an issue. And here's just a few examples of some recipes. We have a creamy fennel and white bean soup with bacon. So it uses the fennel bulb, garlic, some fennel seeds as well, some cannellini beans, low sodium chicken broth, some fresh rosemary or dried if you don't have any, and pepper and salt to taste. Basically, you're going to cook your bacon and you're going to add your onions and garlic and fennel and kind of cook that until they're tender. And then you're going to add your beans. You're going to simmer that until it's all nice and hot. And then you're going to puree the soup in a blender or an immersion blender. And then you can add some whole beans back in if you like a chunkier soup. And then, of course, you're going to top with the cooked bacon. If you don't do bacon, if you're vegetarian or for whatever reason, you can certainly omit the bacon. And then we have a shrimp and fennel in a garlic sauce. So again, using the bulb of the fennel, some seasoning and spices of a chili powder, salt, pepper, some bay leaves. This uses raw shrimp. You can use the frozen pre-cooked shrimp that you just heat up, and then some lime juice, butter, and some Parmesan. Here, this recipe uses egg noodles. You can certainly use any egg noodle that you want. But you're just going to saute up the fennel with some of the spices, and then you're going to cook the shrimp with it, and then you just serve that over the pre-cooked bed of noodles. Moving on to kohlrabi. Again, this plant also, the entire thing is edible, the bulbs and the leaves, believe it or not. It is referred to as German turnip, so it is similar to the turnip family, although slightly different. As Anthony had indicated, it is available in the two colors of green and purple. The different colors do equal different polyphenols or the antioxidants. So if you've attended any of our previous Dig Your Dinners, you may have heard me talk about our blueberries and our grapes and those anthocyanins that are found in the purple. Well, your purple and green have different antioxidants and these different polyphenols, and we all need them all. So definitely encouraging. And if you can find kohlrabi, go ahead and get it and have it. Or if you have the green ones, all of them are going to be good and nutritious. Same with kohlrabi. It is a nutrition powerhouse, low calorie for the most part, low carbohydrate. So again, very diabetic friendly if you are watching carbohydrates. Kohlrabi does have a bit more fiber than our fennel at about 5 grams per 1 cup, which is really quite a good amount protein. And then actually kohlrabi has almost 93% of our daily vitamin C intake. So it's very high in vitamin C. When we do cook our fruits and vegetables that are high in vitamin C, we do lose some of that vitamin C. So to get the most benefit, eating kohlrabi raw or in a salad form is going to provide us the most vitamin C. And then there's also a good amount of the vitamin B6 and potassium, which is all good for heart health, and magnesium and folate. The health benefits, again, similar to fennel, we have some great health benefits from a reduction in chronic diseases. We have talked about cruciferous vegetables specifically, have a lot of research around them that shows that consuming cruciferous vegetables, your cabbage, your broccolis, kohlrabi, is going to help significantly reduce that risk of death from cardiovascular disease. So by an increase of 10 grams of fiber per day, specifically from the cruciferous vegetables, there was a associated of 13% lower reduction in death from cardiovascular disease. And then, as I mentioned, that high antioxidants, so very high in vitamin C. We know that antioxidants help keep our cells healthy overall, which has many benefits just long term. Use and preparation. So kohlrabi is great for salads, chopped great, cut into matchsticks, again, thinly sliced with the mandolin. You can kind of decide what form you want your kohlrabi to be prepared in to add to your salads. It does work well with other cooked dishes as well. So roasting or grilling that brings out the sweetness, shredded, soups and stews adds a bit of subtleness to them. You can find spiralized or you can spiralize it yourself. It works great in stir fries, grilled. And really, anytime you are adding broccoli, cabbage, radishes, or even some like crunchy potatoes to a recipe, kohlrabi is a great substitution for any of those vegetables. Again, you can use the stems, so definitely keep the stems and the leaves and use them similar to collard greens. You can just dice them up and saute them with some oil and some flavorings, and they are good to go. It's a great way to kind of stretch your dollar if you are purchasing these kohlrabis from the farmer's market or if you're growing them yourself. It's a great way to use that up and prevent some food waste. The kohlrabi, it does have a tough outer skin, so we do definitely want to peel that off. It is edible, yet it's not necessarily preferred. So if you don't mind it, you can keep it on. But if it is tough, you can go ahead and peel that off and just remove that before you eat it or cook it. Storing kohlrabi, but you really wash only when ready to use again. Go ahead and store it in that sealed bag, store chopped in an airtight container, and then store in a paper bag or a towel. Storing your leaves, you do want to separate them. The bulb will last a lot longer than your leaves will. So go ahead and separate those out first and then use them. If the leaves start to wilt, go ahead and use them up. If they become moldy or discolored, then you definitely want to toss them. Again, there are no tested and approved preservation recipes for home canning. And dehydrating, it's really not recommended. The suitability for drying is fair, and so you're really not going to get a good quality product. You can freeze those, so you can cut the tops off and the roots, and you can peel that whole bark off. And then you're going to just water blanch them and freeze them in a airtight container. As I mentioned, you can eat the greens with the kohlrabi with the base there. So here's just a recipe that uses the 2 pounds of kohlrabi, some onion, some garlic, some lemon zest, some red pepper flakes, and then the green tops to go with it. And you just basically saute that in a skillet. You will cook the kohlrabi first, the root, just because that does take a little bit longer to cook, and then you'll add in your greens as they'll take less time to cook. And then the kohlrabi fritters, as I mentioned, you can definitely shred kohlrabi to prepare this. You just want to slice off that root, stems, and greens, and then you're going to peel that outer layer. You are going to shred it. There is some water, so you definitely want to squeeze out some of that extra water before you mix in your egg, flour, and salt and form it into patties. Then you're just going to fry it in a skillet. You could certainly try to air fry these as well if you don't want to fry it in the oil, but it's another great way just to get some vegetables and some other nutrients in a different format. And with that, that is the end of the presentation. And thank you all for listening.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. I did throw a question in the chat there for you if you want to answer it real quick.
So the question, I guess, should read that first, is how long does someone have to be consuming these to experience the health benefits and how often? Again, that is so variable, and we encourage people to consume a variety of fruits and vegetables every day. Now, like anything, there's always too much of a good thing. So sometimes there's some research that shows that consuming too much fennel can have some negative effects, but again, that's large quantities. So on the day to day, just consuming a regular portion serving size is going to provide health benefits. And it's sometimes not one individual fruit or vegetable in our diet, but that day to day that makes up an important factor.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching today. Our topic next month will be winter squash. So if you are someone that is, passionate about cooking with squash and growing it and all the factors that go into those, definitely pay attention. We will be back next month in October. Have a nice day.